So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen. I can get right to it. I have a short, but short in my world because I usually have much longer presentations, but I think this one might be able to just capture everything we want to discuss today. So I'm going to go in presentation mode. Let's see if you can just give me thumbs up once this loads. Yeah, we're all good. Okay, perfect. And I hope my audio is clear. I'm going to try to speak as loud as I can. I do apologize if you hear a ringing sound. It could be just me getting an email. I haven't quite figured out how to mute the emails coming in. But so today's topic, it's going to be centered around innovation during a global pandemic. I felt like that topic might just be interesting enough to address maybe how, as a city, how we've pivoted because of COVID-19. And obviously 2020 just being a remarkably unique and challenging year for so many of us. And then in the midst of that, we'll also cover, just what it means to navigate city processes and procedures while really upholding an equitable vision for justice. And a lot of this is going to be centered around service. So getting you all to really think about ways that you can serve and be civically engaged, both as students, as alumni, and then in all your future ventures. So with that, I'm just gonna go ahead and just give you a quick agenda. We're gonna go over this today. We'll have I think this is part of the introduction. I'll give you a quick snippet on my background. A lot of that was already echoed by Netsi. And then we're going to jump right into how cities pivot, particularly Buffalo, and how our response to COVID-19 has been. We're going to touch on engagement, which is obviously very important. This workshop is really coming from the Civic Engagement Office, so we want to touch on engagement. We're going to then pivot on to code enforcement as it relates to restorative impression work that we do with housing, and then opportunities and challenges that we face as a city, and then examples of how we've adapted, all together reflecting back on specific key takeaways. And then we're going to go over some either organizational culture and climate if we have time, and we're going to circle back towards including marginalized perspective and the importance of including really marginalized perspective in all of our professional work and personal work. And then it's going to really be rolled back over to you in terms of how you intend to solve a lot of the challenges that we were addressing and how you hope to then be a leading trailblazer in your work. So just really quick, I'm Juweria, like Netsi just said. I serve as the External Affairs Manager in the Mayor's Office of Citizen Services. What's not on here right now is really the fact that I'm also the program manager for an amazing AmeriCorps VISTA program that we have. It's a partnership with the regional office, and we've been able to bring on someone as exceptional as Netsi, and Netsi works in a hybrid between City Hall and also Buffalo State. So that's a really good relationship that we've been able to develop with Buffalo State as a university. My background is in architecture and urban planning. A shameless plug, I'm a finalist for the 2021 Athena Young Professional, so I'm really excited for that. And I'm in between right now, just working for City Hall, being in the city for about 6 years. Let me make sure I minimize this so you can see the screen better. I've been with the city for about 6 years now. And I'm in between sector switching, so I'm kind of navigating the transition from the social impact sector to the private sector. And in terms of my hobby, I love taking nature walks in the summer and then ice skating in the winter. Let's proceed to the next slide. All right, so my background, I'm ethnically East African. I was raised in the UK, received my, in the UK, it's called Bachelor's of Science. I think it's just Bachelor's of Arts here, but just in sociology and environmental design. And then I went on to pursue my master's degree in the School of Architecture and Planning. And so my career early on, it started off in technology and the legal sector. And then I soon realized that the two combinations, the two sectors really needed to be more mindful of its both socio-cultural, political, and environmental impact. So that was kind of what really drove me to pursue a career in the public sector. Along the way, I came across some really great professional fellowships that helped me and guided me. And some of the questions I've been able to address is, can entrepreneurial problem solving and creative solutions close economic, societal, and business, as well as technological gaps? And then when I'm not doing all of this professionally, I have a nonprofits where we pretty much focus on teaching life skills to socially and economically disadvantaged women. And if doing that actually leads to an output of improving their quality of life. And I think personally, there's a lot of success stories there. So it's definitely something that I enjoy. And then on a totally flip end, I've done some work with LinkedIn Formation. This is all about working on artificial intelligence, so AI, and combining that with other machine learning algorithms to improve citizens' lives. And there's many ways you can do that. So in a snapshot, that all pretty much led me to be in City Hall, and many different people come to work in the public sector for many reasons. I always tell others we can teach all types of skills, but you've got to come in with a passion. So that's what a program like the one we're in today with the Civic Engagement Office, I think that's what you really get out of. So with that, let's go ahead and start off with this value-led public value proposition. If you don't mind, Betsy, I'm gonna turn off my video. For some reason, it's lagging on my end when I'm seeing you all. So I don't know if that's affecting. So I'm gonna stop my video. I hope that's okay. Can you all hear me still okay? Okay, perfect. It might just be from my end, that I'm not sure. But I'm gonna start us off with the public value proposition. And the reason why this is so important is anytime you are really engaging with the general public, regardless of what type of service work that you're doing, what's so critical is to really have a relationship with the people you're serving. So to be able to understand them beyond just you doing the services. So the value-led proposition for me means meeting the people we're serving halfway and saying, let's come to a mutual consensus of why the work we're doing is so important. So because of the work that I do in housing and infrastructure, here's one that I developed with my team. So I'm going to just read it off real quick. It says, we commit to tackle neighborhood decline as it relates to blight and quality of life because we want to create a safe and healthy community with equity of opportunity. And we propose to do that by identifying community needs and empowering residents on a parcel by parcel strategy. We will know that we are successful when there is improvement in housing, health, and community engagement. So this is a really important way to really engage people, having some sort of a centered value proposition. The next step to that is usually I'm defining KPIs, and KPIs just mean key performance indicator. So anytime you're engaging again, it's so critical to know, A, is the work you're doing impactful? Who is it impacting? Can it be, is it scalable? Can you put a dollar value behind it, for instance? And this helps because at some point you will be in a position where you are writing grants and you have to pitch this argument of why the work you're doing is so important. So when it comes to engagement, for instance, and as it relates to housing, something that I do track is, the parcels impacted. So this is just a snapshot of the platform that we use. It's called Building Blocks. And we try to just get a sense of, the residents that live in the community, their socioeconomic statuses and neighborhood, and, their profiles to get a better sense of which specific engagement tools they're actually benefiting from. So sometimes it's understanding that the residents might not be in a position to apply because there's a gap in language, all those barriers that you might have to cross. So they're just tracking that. When it comes to housing, one major thing that I look for is really the number of permits that are issued. And this is so critical because obviously Buffalo's housing, our housing is really aging. And so that means we have a lot of lead infested properties. A lot of our properties, unfortunately, are deteriorating. And so it really takes some specific knowledge and financial wealth to be able to bring your property up to code. So anytime communities pull a permit to say they're going to fix up their roof or they're going to replace their porch or insulate their windows and doors, those are positive signs that we like to track, which shows either people are benefiting from the services we're offering, or maybe it's people's income that's increasing where they have the financial means. Sometimes it reflects to people transitioning from being renters to homeowners. So those are all metrics that we like to track. And then quality of life, that can be a larger kind of a sense. We give smaller mini grants to folks. And what we challenge people to do is to identify public problems that they have in their community. So the city offers several grants and opportunities. And I think a lot of universities do the same thing, where sometimes you can, gather or recruit your volunteers and then apply for specific funding to do a neighborhood cleanup where you get gloves, maybe sanitizers and masks because of COVID, and garbage totes, garbage bags, I should say, and then some coordination with the city to have the debris and garbage that you've picked up be removed immediately. So those are all things that I'm a part of, and usually I'm tracking and looking for trends to identify gaps. So just big picture, defining KPIs, so defining whatever success indicators look like anytime you're doing an engagement. This is a little bit out of date because of the dates, but what I want to bring to your attention is when COVID hit, I think immediately one thing that a lot of us were focusing on is poverty rate here in Buffalo. So people were already suffering, and there was a lot of challenges that residents here in Buffalo were facing. And then you have the added issue of COVID. And a major metrics that we were trying to track was job loss in Buffalo. What did that actually mean? And between 2019 and 2020, we saw this number of jobs lost, and this number is still growing. But in some of the hardest hit neighborhoods, there was a loss as high as 9.7, and that number has almost doubled at this point. And when you look at housing costs before COVID, 54% of renters citywide were already considered to be rent burdened. And rent burden means it's just somebody who's not in a position where they're able to comfortably pay for their rent and still have a good quality of life. So they're really struggling to make ends meet. So maybe they're choosing between seeing a doctor or maybe having a really, a good meal and paying off their rents. So there's drastic kind of challenges that people are facing. And then 24% of homeowners were also cost burdened. So what does it mean? What it means is COVID, as widespread as it is, it has hit communities differently. And it's so important to acknowledge and understand what that means and the challenges that people have now faced. So let's go back to March, April. This was at the heart of when COVID was, starting. And at least here in our region, and the governor stated an issue and said, well, there has to be a 50% capacity in buildings. And then I think we went drastically to 60%, and then we moved on to only 25% can be present in the workplace. And I think there was one day where we came into the office on a Friday morning, and we went from the 25% to the entire, like everybody just needs to evacuate and go home. So by noon we were closing the doors. And the scariest part really was knowing that as a city and as a city employee, there was no blueprints for this. There was no guide that was going to help us to transition, that was going to help us understand how we can still continue our programming and services, how we were going to transition to remote work, especially when it comes to the 311 call center. If you're not calling 911, you're usually calling 311 to report a specific issue. That could range from street signs that are crooked to illegal dumping taking place in your neighborhood. Really, anytime that you have a quality of life issue, the general public is encouraged to call 311. You log your case, and then you can track it to see if and when the city closes the case and mitigates that issue that you have mentioned. So for this presentation, I'm going to give you a sense of maybe some of the work that we did, hopefully to pique your interest as you kind of think about ways that you can give back and really participate in this new world. So we started off by setting up our priorities, but we had to leverage the specific insights that we had. We've been listening to the community for a very long time, but it was so critical to even listen even more. By listen, I mean just paying attention to, specific challenges that is being mentioned, some specific opportunities that are coming up, whether that's coming from our places of work, if it's coming from our places of worship, if it's coming from our local community that we're part of, just really connecting the dots and seeing the issues that are being presented and the gaps that are then being mitigated. We obviously learn from data because understanding data and being able to map some of this information out and correlate means that we can be more smarter when we specifically deploy resources. And that's kind of how it started. And I really apologize for all the emails that are coming in. So we're going to go through some examples of how we adapted to this new context and really just reimagined resident engagements. Number one, we started to scale up our 311 platform. So in the past, there wasn't a remote option. Everything if you had to contact 311, you would have to either come in through the office, or you can use the app, or you can report an issue using the web page. Now, all of our call center operators are actually working from home. So some of them are juggling being a parent. I know some of you all are doing that. And being able to comfortably be home, safe, and still actively take all the issues and challenges and be the intake for the city. That was so important. So 311 really became a lifeline for so many residents. And we got an outburst number of calls of people just calling and saying, what does this information mean that our governor is launching? And in the morning, there was, by the time the morning briefing was done, by the afternoon, there was new stricter policies and procedures. So 311 really became a means for the city to connect with residents. And I'm really hopeful to really the incredible team that we have that have been able to work with our residents on this. So generally speaking, if you're not familiar with the 311, we roughly take about 600 calls per day. Because of COVID, that number just seemed to increase and increase and increase. So the demand became such a big issue. If you get a chance, and I'm gonna send this, I'm happy to send this presentation to both Netsi and Aurora, if anybody's interested. There's a link here where we put together a video just to kind of give you a sense of how much work that went in to transition from the way that the 311 system was set up to now getting it to be a remote platform. So if you get a chance, definitely check it out. Not all municipalities have a 311 office, so we're fortunate to have that, let alone being able to continue 311 in the midst of a pandemic. Second thing that we did, which was really, really innovative, was the Good Neighbor Network. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the Good Neighbor Network was. In April of 2020, the mayor basically launched this new initiative, and it was called the Good Neighbor Network. As you can see, he's holding these door tags, and the door tags had two sides. One side that had a bunch of resources listed on here, and then the flip side, it had, I need a good neighbor. So the idea was for us to put out a call to the general public and say, hey, would you be interested in serving as a good neighbor network? So a GNN volunteer, because there was no way that we were just going to be able to rely on city staff. And in that call, over 400 volunteers signed up. And this is just excluding the 50 community organizations and block clubs that signed up. But collectively, we delivered 150,000 of these door tags. And each volunteer's responsibility was to leave that door tag on a door. So we would give them the specific blocks that they would cover, and the blocks that each person was assigned to was either in communities where we knew poverty was very high, communities where we knew people were socially isolated, so and seniors that are possibly living alone, people that are on a fixed income, and others that might not have the digital access. So those were kind of the main target, and just generally speaking, anyone who fits into the vulnerability category. So even people who relied on public transportation. So the idea was for the volunteer to hang this door tag on a door, and then within 24 hours come by and see if the door tag has been either, if the person put it inside their house, or if they reversed and flipped the door tag and put it back on their door. If they then did, they would have this I need a good neighbor on their doorknob. So the volunteer would then come back. We gave them an app, and they would log to say either number one, for the volunteer, if they've been able to mitigate the issue, or number two, if the volunteer had to escalate that to 311. So those were kind of like the main responsibility. And what it did was, it basically just was a method designated to alert police, other departments, whatever issue that individual was facing. So the mayor was very big on that. The mayor is a Buffalo State College alumni, so I love this picture in many ways. So we're excited to have him really always wear all of the great gear from your university. So this is what the app looked like. It was a simple free app. It worked on all iPhones and also the Androids. As you can see, it just gives you a quick direction of how to download it. And then we would pre-assign the streets that people would go to. What I normally did was, based on the person's geographic location, we would allocate areas that they are in close proximity. And if they had any challenges, as you can see, my name was listed, they could just contact me, and we would be able to troubleshoot. But the app was just so simple, and I think that worked super well. As you can see here, they would just select, door hanger left. If the door hanger was flipped, they would then select from the following answers. Did the person need assistance with the following? Is it childcare, food services, medical transportation? And then, the important part, is the issue resolved? Did the volunteer resolve it, or did they needed to escalate it to City Hall? And this really became such a great initiative. The next thing that maybe some of you are also familiar with is the COVID-19 resource dashboard. Many, or some, I should say, some municipalities have put this together. Other times it's just been on the county web pages, but we've been able to put together a COVID-19 resource site. And this is what it looks like. It's just a quick overview, and it was just designated to serve as a hub for the city, for residents, to really increase government efficiency and share more equal opportunities for residents. And the website obviously serves as a one-stop destination and is designed to also just assist residents in staying informed regarding COVID-19 updates. So this, again, was another innovative move. If anybody wanted to suggest a specific data set, we were taking that in and kind of building out this resource page. So in the beginning, the resource page really had about 5 points that, obviously increasingly changed. Now, if you want information on mental health and social services, childcare, even walking parks and trails, a lot of that information is right there. You can easily map out some of this information by your neighborhoods, by your districts, kind of look for specific trends, etc. And regarding testing sites and even any additional updates, all of that information was condensed here. So you didn't really need to look through many different news articles or do your own online search. This was all about making it efficient for everyone. And then another exciting thing that we launched was we launched something called the weekly block chat. And this was just a means for us to connect with residents on a weekly basis, inviting a featured guest speaker to really just check in with people, because we knew that a lot more people were working from home. Chances are they were not engaging, at least not having a in-person engagement. So we just thought, okay, well, let's find a way to include people by at least them seeing each other into some shape or form. And for those that couldn't, turn on their video, they had the option to always call in. So that was very important to us. So accessibility. And each week, since COVID hit, we've just been so blessed, knock on wood. We've continued this every Friday session at 12 o'clock where we engage with the general public and kind of present with them some really relevant information as it relates to not only COVID, but just generally information that is interesting and relevant. So it can be something as far as healthcare professionals coming in, all the way to employment agencies that are recruiting, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really been a great success. This is, again, open to the general public. If anybody's interested, please let Netsi or Aurora, anybody on the team know, and I'd be more than happy to kind of include you into that. Another thing as part of that block chat is we've had, tenants and landlord engagement series. We've never done that on a virtual platform. So this was very new to us. And in the past, we've only had about 30 individuals go through the training to better get them as, understand and acquainted into what it means to be a really good landlord. Good is very subjective. Let's just say knowing your rights as a tenant and as a landlord. That was kind of the main priority for us. And now, because this was becoming a virtual event, we didn't have the 30 kind of individual capacity limits. So on the first and second sessions out of the 6, we've had over 300 individuals that were super excited to be part of it. And I think part of that was because a lot specific policies were being rolled out. So the moratorium on rental eviction was up. There was a lot of Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act that people wanted to better understand, the COVID-19 rental assistance, whether you are a homeowner or a tenant, and fair housing. So there was a lot of specific issues that people wanted to learn about. And I think just producing and having these virtual spaces, I think that really helped so many people. And then being transparent and actually asking people, surveying them and saying, what did you like? Would you recommend this? How can we make this better? So I think from a public sector, what's always important is anytime you provide services or any specific programming, never assume that it's being done well. You have to always be critical to the point where you can self-reflect and always constantly find ways to make it smoother, to make it better, to make it more accessible. And that's what some of these surveys have done. So these are just some questions that we have asked. Community Response Fund, which is the 4th thing, probably my favorites. As you can see, the mayor's masked up with some really amazing heroes and sheroes. So we have a program called Love Your Block, which is all about really engaging community volunteers yourselves. You can be a student, you can be a senior. Age is really not a factor. People who are just ambassadors for their neighborhoods or want to actively solve a public problem. So maybe addressing a blighted vacant lot that needs to be turned into a community garden, or an area that needs to be beautified and restored. We give the general public some small scale funding and some technical assistance to get them to that point. So we launched this community response funds to kind of not only focus on the built environment, but we thought, well, we're already doing this for the built environments. COVID hit. Maybe people will have some additional ways that they want to support their communities, whether it's how, creating a food drive or a PPE giveaway, whatever that might be. Let's give the tools and funding to the people, and they can kind of self-activate themselves. So this map here kind of, and obviously the colors can change over time, but these were COVID cases that we were tracking, and this is just a quick snapshot from July, as you can see. And these are all the projects that we were able to fund. So we had roughly, I think it was 21 organizations and groups that applied. So there was block clubs, community-based organizations, just individuals that kind of congregated and said, here's what we want to address. And the priority there was we had to focus on how disproportionately COVID has impacted minority communities across not only Buffalo, but the nation. So that was really important. And every applicant just had to show how their proposed project was going to impact this highly impacted zip code. So that's kind of what it was. If anybody's interested, there is a link here. You're more than welcome to read a little bit more about it. But these are just some images. Here are the 21 groups. We kind of tried to track all the great work that they did. And so if anyone has questions, we're going to get to that at the end. Some key takeaways from what we learned in COVID-19. Number one was everything was going, there wasn't a single strategy that was the main strategy. I think there were multiple strategies. They were all interconnected, and they were constantly evolving. So typically, when you think about volunteering anywhere or engaging the community, we have this one-way approach of in-person interaction being the only way to really support communities. I think with COVID, we've learned that there's different ways that you can really support communities. And the biggest, or at least one of the bigger issues has really been addressing this digital divide. So for some families that have young children who are still in the remote learning world, the assumption that parents are there to support their children in terms of navigating the whole online classes. If parents are illiterate, then that means the children, obviously, who are young, maybe second grade, first grade, who might not have that capacity to even log onto a computer and really access whatever platform or software they need to, they might be missing out. And we really saw that. So a lot of parents were calling 311, kind of actively asking us which organization or which groups or what services are being offered to parents who are not literate. So let alone for those who were able to engage with us, imagine those who didn't even know they could call 311, or if they could call 311, didn't have the language to be able to communicate and convey that to us. So there are boots on the ground, I think, meaningful ways that you can engage, but there's also just many other ways that at least you can really start thinking about whether you are a student or really just a community representative on the call to this. Just kind of start thinking about that. I'm going to cover just really quickly and some additional programs and activities. Here, there's a program called the Clean Sweep in the city of Buffalo, and because of COVID, we've had to kind of modify it differently. But each week on a Wednesday, from the months of May through to October, we go out to really the most distressed part of the city. So parts of the city that sometimes don't call 311, parts of the city where they're, with, I guess, demolished homes for many reasons, because of the exodus of people leaving the community, or just because the property is just being blighted, et cetera, and deteriorating. So challenges that communities have faced. And so what's really incredible is really the work and the environment that we try to create. So it's a marriage between community services, organizations that come door to door to drop off literature to residents while they are at home. So really having that meaningful impact. Normally we do about 30 of those each year. Because of it just being the first time we're dealing with COVID, we had to condense that, and we really didn't have that many. I think we had a total of about 4 sweeps and then we were able to scale it up to 8 by the end of it. But again, these are opportunities that you can all be a part of. Buffalo State College is a great partner with the city on this. So if you have questions, we'd be more than happy to kind of loop you in and introduce you to that world. These are just some images. As you can see, the partners are just going door to door. We were masked. Our partners kind of were going door to door. Everybody was masked. And we're very proud to say that we were able to still, in the midst of a pandemic, go door to door and take all safety precautions, because we knew it was even more important to go and visit these residents because they were socially isolated. So this really became a lifeline for so many. Here's the Love Your Block projects that I also mentioned earlier. We're now hitting on year 3. So if you live anywhere in the city of Buffalo, consider partnering up with another organization or a block club to submit a Love Your Block project. And Love Your Block projects can really focus on one of these 3. So you can focus on a vacant lot activation, so turning that into a garden, maybe a play area, installing some sort of a public art, so murals, all of that is fine. Another category is the community space revitalization. Maybe there's a specific area in your neighborhood that needs some repair. Maybe it's benches, maybe some graffiti needs to be removed. And obviously, maybe flip that with adding a mural. Maybe you want to plant trees, add some landscaping. Whatever that is, I think Love Your Block is definitely a good project. And then last but not least, accessibility improvements. So implementing some sort of lighting or replacing broken or worn out litter bins, and really anything else that's in that community. This would be a really good means to get that fixed, because you would get some funding from the city and technical support. So you don't have to come up with your own project. There's several community members that are actively looking to apply. So maybe be that person, because of your experience, that you were able to maybe help draft some of that application. So stay tuned. You can follow Love Your Block on all social media and also just the city webpage to learn more about when the application will be launched. You might be asking, well, what about winter? Because a lot of the stuff I talked about was obviously in the warmer season, but winter is equally important. People are more socially isolated in winter. So we actually we're fortunate to launch a program called Winter Mission. I mean, engagement and volunteerism doesn't just stop because of the warmer weather, because we'd be missing out. We're not in Florida, we're in Buffalo. So realistically, it's so important to just have that engagement and ongoing engagement all year round. So I'll tell you more a little bit about Winter Mission. It's basically an innovative program that aims to combat social isolation and increase level of physical activity in winter. So no matter their age, their socioeconomic or ethnographic backgrounds, the point is to really get people just engaged all year round, particularly in the winter. So this is actually a young lady who stopped by one of our events. I think we were at the Roosevelt Park, so this is here in Buffalo. And we started off by unfolding 3 stages. We had an engagement process where we had like a citywide conversation about life in winter, what people liked, what people disliked, why they disliked it, the challenges that they face. And people talked a little bit about how sidewalks needed to be shoveled, and how sometimes in certain parts of the city, it's really difficult to take public transportation, all of those factors. And then after we condensed and really interpreted the engagement process, we're able to launch, we shaped a series of projects through community dialogue. And there were a couple of pilot projects, and we're kind of now expanding those pilot projects to see really realistically what makes sense to maintain on a longer period. And then we strategized, we developed the Winter City strategy. Again, we're in the process to, on a different note, we're working on our Parks Master Plan. But in the past, I mean, we haven't renewed our Parks Master Plan since the 1980s. And for some reason, our strategic plan has never incorporated winter. So that's just been obviously a bummer for the city of Buffalo, but a financial loss too. So for the first time, just acknowledging that winter is part of the city, and planning and actively engaging residents in the winter is equally as important. So just keep that in mind. Don't look at just the summer period as warmer times to engage, but winter times too. So here were some of the pilot projects. People really wanted some input on winter snow clearance. They wanted that improved. They wanted to see more winter programming, a lot of winter warmth activities, and winter inclusivity. So this was really, really important. If anybody's interested, I can also hyperlink maybe after this chat today, the report that came out. And since this launch, because we're talking about March 19, in 2020, what we've been able to achieve, and maybe ways that you can also support winter mission if that's something that you're interested in. So again, some additional the pilot projects kind of extended this past year. We offered some winter mission micro grants. So again, we're always all about equipping the community and giving them the tools and resources for them to identify public problems that they want to address. So it was a micro grant program that funded block clubs and other smaller coalitions that were committed to really creating some sort of a community inclusivity, which meant that they were involving their youth, their seniors, other volunteers to address sidewalk accessibility. Sidewalk accessibility speaks to just making sure that, you know, the same way that we prioritize people that can walk, the cyclists, people who might be on a wheelchair, parents that might be, you know, walking with a stroller, all of those different populations to have that equal or some sort of a accessibility that allows them to still have a good quality of life and go from location A to B. That was kind of the priority among so many. We won't go through all of them, but the weatherization kits also became so helpful. This was a partnership with National Grid. And we've also kind of worked with communities in building a shed. And when they build sheds, what they did was they would store and purchase specific winter supplies and also summer supplies so they could do gardening, and the community wouldn't be burdened with having those supplies on their own, and it served as a community tool, kind of a tool library building shed, which was really neat. You'll probably see a couple of these popping up around the city. When you do, look for the word "Love Your Block" and you'll know that it was a funded project that we had. All right. Including marginalized perspective. And I specifically just wanted to take a, just pause here for a moment, because we've talked about how disproportionate the COVID pandemic itself has hit, of course, the city as a whole. But what does it mean when we're talking about including marginalized perspective, right? And I like to reference this to a specific resource that I have, which is the Center for Social Inclusion. And they define racial equity as both an outcome and a process. I think the image here, of course, speaking to equality, you can see what that looks like, and then what equity means. And I think that the images are really self-explanatory. So here, it just says, as an outcome, the Center for Social Inclusion believes that racial equity is achieved when race no longer determines one socioeconomic outcome, when everyone has what they need to thrive, no matter where they live. And then they also see it as a process, and it applies to racial equity when the most impacted by structural racial inequity are meaningfully involved in the creation and implementation of the institutional policies and practices that impact their lives. So this is a really good, I think, definition that can really center on, what racial equity means. And for anyone that's not quite sure of the difference between the terminologies, I think if you have a moment, go around and visit the Center for Social Inclusion. Their definitions and toolkits are just phenomenal, and all of that is free of charge. But just really quick, what I want you to do is just in your mind, imagine two neighborhoods. Okay, we're going to quickly talk about these two neighborhoods. In neighborhood one, and you can look closely at the images, it's a family of four, and it's the Smiths. And the Smiths neighborhood is stagnating, with abandoned homes, poor schools, it's over-policed. And most of the neighbors, including the Smiths, are people of color. You can see from the images, you can see the fence here. The apartment looks like it's not in the best condition. And just to the right, you can see a lot of blighted properties where it looks like it's boarded up. Perhaps somebody's living there, perhaps somebody's not. The window is smashed. And this is an image from Buffalo. I don't think this one is, but this image is from Buffalo. You might be familiar with this, or maybe this is a shock where you've never seen something like this. Let's switch over to neighborhood two. In the adjoining neighborhood, so not too far away from, neighborhood one, there's the Jones, and the Jones neighborhood has plenty of fresh food markets. They have a robust bus system. As you can see, there's bike lanes, they've got parks, and health centers and good schools. So, and what you'll notice is that families are just flocking there because all of these, amazing services like the ones we listed translate to economic opportunity and good health. And who wouldn't want that? But most families who happen to live here in this neighborhood, including the Jones, are white. And what I want you to really take from just visualizing, neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 is think about their life outcomes and how the environment can really play a big factor. I know that I just specifically said that one neighborhood particularly were people of color, and one specifically were not. And so the city of Buffalo, as you know, and I'm really a person who highly believes that we are getting to the point where we're investing in communities that really have not been invested in for many years. But what's even more critical is when you think about COVID itself has been an issue, but the communities that have been historically marginalized, this is an added trauma, an added issue that they're having to deal with. So life outcomes based on your zip code, health out, and there's so many studies that relate to this, based on your health outcomes, educational outcomes, economic outcomes, based on your zip codes is a really, really big factor in people's lives. So the next time you communicate with someone, just think about maybe the neighborhood condition that they're coming from, how they perceive policing, especially over policing, what that means. Maybe if there are pushbacks, just having that empathetic and understanding that not everybody is starting at the same level field, that it's just not the same. And because of this barrier, it's going to show in our education, it's going to show in our workforce, it's going to show in all of these important economic opportunity factors that we just can't turn a blind eye on. So this is just a pause moment to understand real life context. You might be someone who lives in a neighborhood 2, or you might be someone who lives in neighborhood 1. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a black and white thing. It actually speaks more to your, access to wealth and the class, like the social class that you come from, and opportunities as such. But in essence, communities that have been historically marginalized have been people of color. And that's why I wanted to just bring this to everybody's attention. There's also a great slide that I followed up with that just give you some additional tools and resources. Of course, I already mentioned the CSI group. So there's talking about race toolkit, race forward, racial equity assessment toolkits, and among so many other. And I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with it. But if anything, the NPR Housing Segregation and Redlining in America, which is a fantastic video. I highly encourage so many of you to really watch it if you're not familiar with it, but it will give you a good background. And I'm an urban planner, so this is really, I get really geeky and unpacking a lot of this information. So I hope you will also take a moment to watch that video. So we're wrapping up our presentation, but to conclude, take some time to understand the makeup of your community, understand the people you're serving. So really focusing on having a relationship with the people and not just looking at them as, oh, this is just another group of people that I'm servicing. Have a relationship with them. Be more than just a resource to them. You can do that by getting involved. Buffalo State College has so many incredible opportunities to volunteer, to meet your neighbors. Get involved, whatever that might be. Could be a small scale gardening to a more robust bookkeeping opportunity where you help a nonprofit grow. Whatever that might be, take a moment. You can get involved in housing. This is a picture again from Buffalo. It's not a third world country. It's right here in Buffalo, New York. And expose yourself to the opportunities and challenges, the neighborhood design factors, transportation and accessibility. There's so many opportunities and challenges to unpack, especially when it comes to food access and health. Physical environment also being another major one. How do you intend to solve it? For me, I always say use data, have the right people at the table, collectively formulate an action, and then measure your impact. And all of this, of course, has to be rooted in equity and justice. So that's my leaving question. How do you intend to solve it? If at any point you wish to learn a little bit more about ways that you can give back, we are recruiting AmeriCorps VISTA members. Maybe consider being an AmeriCorps. Consider just being a lifetime advocate in terms of your civic engagement and the work that you do both on campus, off campus, and beyond. But with that, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and turn my video back on so that I'll be able to kind of engage with some of you if you have any questions or thoughts or reflections. Netsi and Aurora, I'm kicking it back over to you.
Thank you, Juweria, so much. I have a question that came through on the chat, and I'm wondering if you can answer it about the AmeriCorps program that you just mentioned on the last slide there. Can you talk a little bit more about how the AmeriCorps program impacts some of the things that you were talking about this afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely. So AmeriCorps itself is, the priority of AmeriCorps is eradicating poverty. So you really just have to be a citizen of the United States, and you have to be over 18. Outside of that, you can really look for specific organizations that you want to work with. You can be in the private sector, you can be in the public sector. There's so many different groups. Buffalo State College has an AmeriCorps program itself. And this is through our office. We have, the program is called Project M.O.V.E. And essentially what we do is we invite individuals to apply and serve in a 1-year period. So the 1 year means you get a stipend. There's also the educational award you get at the end of it, and really a great opportunity to serve and give back. You'll be eradicating poverty in multiple ways. So if you are stationed, say, in a department that addresses housing, right now, because of COVID, a lot of that focus is making sure that people are getting the right loans, so that they're not being evicted from their homes, etc. If your issue is more on civic engagement and getting students to actively participate in this world, you can talk to Netsi. Netsi is an AmeriCorps out of our office and has just been doing an amazing job. So AmeriCorps is really one way to really just be civically engaged, be mindful of your community, give back, and then really have a lifetime of an experience. You'll also be part of a larger network. It's not just within the city of Buffalo, so you'll have access to all other AmeriCorps across the country. And so there's a domestic version, it's called AmeriCorps VISTA. If you're not interested in that, you want to fly out of the country, there's also NCCC. So depending on maybe where your interest lies, really think about opportunities as such. Out of our office, we have our AmeriCorps program. It's stationed in the mayor's office, and then we deploy everybody to different city departments. And then we have partnering agencies and organizations. So Buffalo State College is an amazing partner with us. I hope that answers your question, Aurora.
Juweria, I'll ask a question. As a city resident, I am impressed with all of the ways the city responded to COVID and ways to engage citizens. Do you feel like there's lessons learned that you might continue kind of post-pandemic as we look ahead? Were there strategies that helped you engage different individuals than you otherwise would have had, attend in person, or are there, some of those methods that we might see continue?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a funny story. So so the mayor, obviously just being the world's busiest person, working for the mayor means it's almost impossible getting hold of him. COVID hit and he's been so accessible. You can now schedule a meeting with him, and we've had like a standing meeting, 7:30 in the morning. It's just really quick. And we haven't really thought about using online platforms. And I think because it's really meant that somebody that's really busy, for him, it saved him a lot of transportation time. So instead of going from location to location, addressing all these meetings and engagements that he needs to be part of, he's been able to virtually connect with people on a larger scale. And this isn't to say that people everybody has access to it, but for a very large portion of the work that we do, we're able to access people just remotely the way that we are. I mean, look at this program right now. We would have been in person just 2 years ago, or not too long ago, and now we're able to still connect and have this program. So I think lessons learned is ensuring that the new hybrid world is really an okay way, that we don't have to be so scared of still doing things remotely if and when it's appropriate. So that's been really helpful. Another thing that's been interesting to see is just that our 311 call center can actually be remote. In the past, regardless of how cold of a weather we had, even on a bad storm, we would still have to have our 311 operators coming into City Hall, because it was just the only possible way to engage with people was through in person. Now we're able to tell families, if your children are off from school and you need to work from home, you can work from home and you'll still be able to fully participate in your workforce. So I think that's really going to reshape how we engage, how we work. And those are some major, I guess, innovation that we've had to overcome. So that's definitely the new world and how we're going to contribute, and I guess how we're going to work.
Thanks. We've seen a lot of the same things, and there's definitely downs to all of this remote stuff, but there's some things that we might continue too. So thanks.
And Juweria, there was another question that came in through the chat from Katie, and she's wondering if the one-year AmeriCorps positions are intended for graduating seniors, or if current undergraduate or graduate students could also become an AmeriCorps member.
Yeah, really good question. As long as you're over 18, you can apply to be an AmeriCorps. So you can be someone who's just, you're a freshman, maybe you want a gap year, maybe you are someone who just finished high school, and instead of going on to pursue your bachelor's degree, you want to take some time out and serve as an AmeriCorps. We've had folks do that. Sometimes it's people who want to go from undergrad to graduate programs, and it's a gap year. Other times it's people who are in their 30s who feel like a lot of the work that they've done is just been in corporate banking, and they feel like they're not being fulfilled in terms of their work. So they've switched gear and just decided to learn a little bit more about AmeriCorps. What I find kind of another attractive thing about the AmeriCorps program with the city is we try to retain people, we try to retain talent. So we've tried to hire people who went through our AmeriCorps program, because we want to see more people coming through the AmeriCorps program, and then continuing their civic engagement duties by actually being hired in the public sector. So we've had examples like that. And if it's not in the public sector, venturing off to the world that you want to, but knowing that you can get letter of recommendations from the city and support from your supervisors and really the network of AmeriCorps. So no, you don't have to be a senior, etc. You just have to be 18, be a citizen, and then you need to have the passion. So again, we can teach all the skills, but we can't teach passion. You have to come with the will and drive to really serve people.
Great, thank you for that. I did put in the chat for anyone, if you're interested in Project M.O.V.E.'s website, I put that in there. And then the CCE here on campus, we're hiring 3 positions, one of which is Nazi's position through Project M.O.V.E. So I did link that there as well. And then Katie had a follow-up question too, like on how, on average, do you know how many AmeriCorps positions are typically offered in I'm assuming a year?
Oh, sure. So there's many AmeriCorps positions, right? The one with the city is just one, the one that I'm speaking on, which is Project M.O.V.E. I already just mentioned the CCE is also, so there's a couple of other positions. The Western New York Collaborative has a position, Cradle Beach, People Inc. So there's a couple of different organizations. For us in Project M.O.V.E., we typically hire about 15 people. Our recruitment process is actually open right now. So we're looking to hire for people to start in May, and then a second cycle of people to start in September. So those are usually the time frame, but we have a lot of flexibility because we don't always fill up each 15 position. We try to kind of move around so that if for some reason somebody's not able to remain in the program where they have to drop out, sometimes that happens, unfortunately, because of financial reasons. And just other times, timing can just be tough, and recruitment can be tough. So we've had other AmeriCorps members kind of join in at different times. So it really just depends on what the availability is, but for this one, it's May and September. I apologize.
Great, thank you. And I did put in there, if anybody has questions about AmeriCorps, there's a couple of programs here locally in the Civic and Community Engagement Office. We can connect you and kind of direct you to the right place to go. AmeriCorps.gov is another good place to go as well if you're looking for AmeriCorps programs. So feel free to reach out to our office at cce@buffalostate.edu.
Yeah, you guys are a great resource, though.
Yeah, we are always here for students. Happy to answer those types of questions for you.
Yeah.
I think Nazi's internet bumped her off, so I will.
Oh, no, I just realized, yeah.
Yeah, I will wrap up with it for everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the workshop this afternoon, Juweria. Thank you so much for presenting on all of this really great information about the city and your response to COVID-19 during a really crazy and unprecedented time in our life. And we really appreciate all that you do and all of the support. And thank you again for taking the time to talk to us about that this afternoon.
No problem. Thanks for having me. And if anyone has follow-ups, just please feel free to just let me know. I'm happy to just chat offline with anyone else.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.